Good morning. Am I on? Yeah. Let's start with prayer to Geshe. Praise to Geshe. Obeisance to Guru and protecting Manjushri, holds his heart with scriptural texts symbolic of his things or things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun unclouded by defilements or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the patient love of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prism of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their sufferings. Yours whose stronger thunder proclamation of the Dhamma arises from their stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom hews our suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. I entreat you, Manjushri, its princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Manjushri, a loving one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosed in my mind, enlighten my intelligence of wisdom, so I might gain insight into Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Sashi Proki Jun Shin Leto Tam Shi Ni Degen Padi Sangye Shi Mi Te Owa Doku Namda Shila Chupasho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Gandiya Dayami Sanji Chedan Sojin Chonung La Chanju Bardu Dane Chausun Chi Dagi Chushi Jive Chonung Drolam Peshe Sanjin Chubarasho Sanji Chedan Sojin Chonung La Chanju Bardu Dane Chausun Chi Dagi Chushi Jive Chonung Jin Drolam Peshe Sanjin Chubarasho Sanji Chedan Sojin Chonung La Chanchu Bardu Dani Chapsun Dagi Chushi Jibin Sonum Ji Drolam Penchi Sanji Drubaran Sho Kanki Tuzi Nizone Tawa Tamji Pambi Cher Tambi Chun Denze Kodam Chela Chance Lo. So it's Wednesday tea day. Let's do the chai offering. Lama Sangye Lama Chudeshi Lama Gendu Kungi Chepo Lama Te Lama Namla Chepa. Good morning, everyone. Enjoy tea. Kazi tsamnima sajisumba di mumbi nyebala shi seti sajisumba mumbi nyebala shi lengi la momba tang teme la momba tang tela zoba pangwa lu la seba nyeba tumi chongni yinya tangzhe la nyimbu limbi chidu somar chawa wo sen So in picking up from where we left off yesterday, let's first of all look at the outline. We're looking at a section that explains how we examine the faults of the body, and today we're going to begin with the shortcomings of delusion, of ignorance. There are 4 main points to this section. Being deluded about right and wrong, being deluded about praise and defamation, abandoning objection to that, and finally, through craving after the body is the source of much wrongdoing. Though craving after the body is the source of much wrongdoing, one must guard it in order to take the essence of the leisures and endowments.
어디래졌다? 저당기 몸비 예바 그러 미시바 돈중 고 송바인 난신기 간지 몽차위 제라 되니 차와 가르쳐 봐야 날다 딱다 로야지 용거 말아왔으라.
So here, as we're looking at the drawbacks of confusion, normally we say that of the gateways to downfalls, the first one is unknowingness. Through not knowing, we engage in actions that result in downfall. So this is in general something that causes us all sorts of unwanted consequences.
테레다 디나는다 렉니라 몽바이나 렉니 세디 다 렉니디 렉바다 녜바 세디 지단 카이나 깜딜 다 빵랑라에 잘고인자 직 빵랑 수전도 제바디 렉바로스 빵랑 수전도 마치바디 아니 멜렉바 녜비 차인자 아니 몽비 왕기 빵랑 수전도 제바세디 용스 마로스라 딘자다 몽비 녜바 렉니라 몽비 몽바디기 아니 다 빵랑 수전도 제야 타와 토비아 탐지김이 공부드베세디 렉니라 몽서위 제라 자원이니 용하여 말았어. 디모용 간라야 아니 착당 몽좀 바시기 샤원도 드지마도 용구여 말았어.
So to begin with, when we look at the first point in the outline, being deluded about right and wrong. Of course, we can speak about different types of good and bad or right and wrong, but particularly here, taking up what we need to do and casting aside what we ought not to do is what is right. Not doing that is what is wrong. So here, due to delusion, due to confusion, we do not take up what we need to do and we do not abandon what we ought not to do. And that brings about unwanted consequences. Because of ignorance, because of delusion, it is impossible to attain what we seek, which is a state of liberation or the state of enlightenment. So here, particularly when we think of the drawbacks of delusion or the drawbacks of confusion, we look about it in a particular sense. We look about it in relation to not understanding what we need to do in our practice.
자외나 류기 카다 제바에 되면 동안 예산이 제수 차단 컨트롤과 신종들라 지식차스.
Verse 180 says, having accumulated suffering for no purpose because of honoring this body, of what is attachment, of what use is attachment and anger for this thing that is similar to a piece of wood.
이케 류기 림주 카다 제바에 되면 동안 mambo 니버산이 펜을 제발라 제수 차봤던 컨트롤 도마기비 류짱 전수 매바 신단 총비 류들라 차비 지식자 제바 메릭소스.
In explaining this verse, the commentary says, Mind, by following the body's advice for admiration and praise, you accumulated many needless sufferings. Although supporting the body that generates much attachment and anger in relation to benefit and harm, since this body is like a piece of wood that cannot repay the kindness, but uses its attachment to it. It is unsuitable.
일단 디나노라야 송디 yi da lu ni de chitang yi da lu ni loga rawasra loga inza pena yi se di ani sem sari ki chajiri dem duje ki chajiri lu di pigi duthen dubadraw duthen ko kombodraw kanji su raba pembi chaj ro dindiji chagoros tinza da yi gi pe ani teme gi ani lu gi chedo ani pena chasam la soba and dindiji gi on the song ta yi gi trinchine dongar mambu kanji teme gi megi wile mambu lu gi chedo sa de ati tele goba chi yo mares goba chi me kerangi yi kerangi lu gi chedo kar ani kale ge donga saba na lu pigi shindong da jaba kebas khan khan yo mares taro
The commentary says here, mind by following the body's advice for admiration and praise. So in general, the mind and the body are distinct. The mind is that which is clear and knowing. It is a non-associated, you can say that it is a, it has non-associated elements to it. It is a compounded phenomenon. And the body is also compounded. It is made of minute particles. So when the mind, we say, when the mind becomes confused, it accumulates many faultless, many faulty actions for no use, for no purpose. For what end do we accumulate such pointless, false, pointless negativities for the sake of sustaining something which is like a piece of wood?
tiri chizang chunju nanglo ya manzi lu gin zhanga namshin zhamba por so na shingi ani lu gi nima chigla ya ani karsota shani lu di shani dhajire ma to be ani yi da nyamdo ani khadyu na tendu de yobachi tang nganzu dan tong ngonsum tong tugro was in ro tendiji imba inna ani pigi telya chi shu chi ani chede dang zinjong dang tangzin chene tartu pendo meba ani khatan drogu yoba shishendo ani tendiji kaso daji digba mambu shu chi karjin sagi use.
Just as one of the previous verses said, this body is like a guest house in which the mind settles in for just a short time. At some point, the mind will depart from the guest house of the body. So we can see that directly that one day the mind will depart from the body. We know that directly. And yet, when we look at the attitude that we have towards the body, then we care for it, we protect it, we hold it dearly as if that will not come to pass. And on account of that, we accumulate many negativities. So why do we accumulate so many negativities? For the sake of protecting that thing from which one day the consciousness will inevitably depart. Now here, keep in mind the bigger context. We're looking at reasons that are used in order to overcome attachment, in order to overcome attachment to the body, because it is unsuitable, unreasonable to become attached to the body. So for that end, when we look at verse 181, it says, whether I'm sustaining my body in this way, or whether it is being eaten by vultures and the like, if it has no attachment or hatred, why then am I so attached to it? Now looking at the commentary, Joe can loimba. Okay.
어디리다 다 ngone thane gi nganzula ya tara pena nga do na shuchi chi one rea samsam do yungu do ka na lu khora pigi ani ru to kar cheba na se chagol sobe se kar cheba na lu khora ngone ani telya chabagi mundu damagi mundu ani sem I khora ngone ani 가진 디치기스 루 코란을 캐바 카이 메오지길래 샘 교랑은 가르치기스 라
Looking at this verse again, it says, whether I'm sustaining my body in this way or whether it is being eaten by vultures and the like, it has no attachment or hatred. Why then am I so attached to it? Geshe says that for him at least it rings true. This is really the case. If the body is being beaten, if it's being cut, if it is being eaten by vultures, the body itself doesn't care about it. In a sense that the body itself doesn't generate attachment or hatred to certain situations. So why mind do you generate attachment or hatred in relation to the body if the body itself does not do that?
pena ludi pena nyamtabi sumjenan shingi pigilaya kangawala tsudebachi ani chi dindiji yimbayana ani semgungone pa robachena cheobachi di mebalaya lu korangone kanye keba megojilaya ani semgungone lega töbüsuru shedebayna düzü çolar edoas o dindisungosaresra.
So it is indeed a case that had the body been a sentient thing, that it would have, for example, considered itself to be in a pitiable situation, then the mind could have pitched in and assisted the body, for the body has felt that it is in a pitiful situation, but the body does not think about it like that. So why then, Shantideva says, why mind do you react to that in being attached to the body?
내가 간지 도도 이 경우에 룰라야 가르치는 차기였어. 로 룰라 가진 차바치기였어. 샘 차기였어. 차 고약 균제 문두스라고다. 차 고약 균제 문두스.
So in short, why mind are you attached to the body? There's no reason whatsoever for being attached to the body.
그래서 간지 샘날이야. 땅이 루색. 니 루이 균쟁기 아니 차바치야지. 로 니 루이 균쟁지 룰라야 차고요나 땅이 비다 가리는 용거라다 룰론주 참을 니 고니 라바 니 비 베난 타나 아니 니 쪽바스 라원디기 아니 니 세디 용거도 아스라 디임바나 베나 징갸라 소발야 아니 차바지고야 셴바지고야 어 딘디기 네수치 다 용거 디 용거모다스 아니 룰라야 니 루이 균생기 아니 샘디 룰라야 가르친 차기였어 달 균생 문두스.
So in thinking of reasons why we become attached, if you think that, if you claim that it is suitable to be attached to the body because this is my body, so the reason for being attached to it is because it is mine, you can say that just as well there are other things that are mine and we're not attached to. So first of all, looking at the different parts of the body. So this is my body, this is my head, this is my hand, this is my leg, but also these are my feces, this is my urine, and so forth. And we're not attached to those things, are we? So if you claim that it is reasonable to become attached to the body because this is mine, well, just as well, there are other things that are mine, but we are not attached to them. So this reason doesn't work here.
그래 두 상단으로 균생 차고야 균생 여드 메기 돌아야 상루당니 차고야 균생 자원님 매버디 아니 샘래야 네번 유튜브이나 아니 차버도야야 슈펜도 용거로스로.
So we're working here with reasons, and when we develop certainty with respect to the reasons that are used here, we can use that in order to overcome attachment.
다긴 데들 롱주 이짱바원 자구 소지 쇠장롱 루코란란 편을 제발라 착바 매지 셰당 여범이나 라니 이치데 텔 착바치 착바 메릭 소스.
The commentary says, although one has supported it with enjoyments, it is suitable to be even the food for vultures and the like, since it has no attachment or anger towards the benefit or harm it receives. Why does one have attachment for it? It is unsuitable.
예, 간주 찌그나라야 릭 메릭 세디 메릭 소 세디 균센 싸원이네 매바치고야 시고라서 릭 세나 균센 여바치고야.
When the commentary claims that it is unsuitable, it is the same as saying that this is not reasonable. The word in Tibetan rik also means can also means reason or logical reason. So here Shantideva says that it is unreasonable to be attached to the body.
되는 이버드 다 멜라야 몽바 되다 멜라야 몽니 야 콘로당 셰당기야 딘디용거라스 간식 매비 초와당 간식 대비 고기와 가데 되니 시메나 다기 간지 나와치스.
Or we can say it doesn't make sense to become attached to the body. Now, looking at the next section, being deluded about praise and defamation. So we react to praise and defamation with attachment or anger. Let's look at verse 182. If it knows no anger when derided and no pleasure when praised, for what purpose am I wearing myself out like this?
대단한족이 비길이야 되다 멜라야 몽송디 샘 몽비칼이야 아니 지케랑 루 야부레 슬라원디게 아니 샘나라야 초슈치레데야 가와슈지 용데야 아니 케랑 루 두자레 슬라원디 아니 샘나라야 마기바 용데야디 아니 되사다 메사기시 루 코랑원에 가두 카야만도스 가야 철구만도스 디 철구면나 샘 케랑원에 딘디 가두 초아지 가진 기기였어 가진 지기였어.
We react to praise and blame. For example, the mind reacts to praise or blame that are directed at the body. If someone tells us that our body looks good, then we become happy. Since that sometimes we are brimming with joy when someone comments in a positive way in relation to the body. Whereas if someone says a negative thing about our body, we become angry. But the body itself doesn't really sense either this praise or blame. The body itself doesn't react with joy or with unhappiness when in relation to praise or blame. So why mind, Shantideva says, why are you reacting to it in this way if the body itself does not react to it?
제 단스우르다 제베나 루텔레 께 간식이 메베 초와다 용데 간식이 되비 고원교와 가디 때문에 되냐 류랑기 셰바메나 류코랑원이 초와다 셰바스케메나 이 다기 강기 된도 차단기 권에 나와 자와치 되메도스.
One becomes angry when this body is criticized due to a fault, and one is happy if it is praised due to equality. But if the body has no awareness of this praise and criticism, mind, to what end do you exhaust yourself with attachment and anger? It is pointless.
텔 쪼바봉말라스 쪼바봉말라 간식 륜든 되기르바 대단 다시 인시나 탐지랑기 륜데비 텔다고 찌마가스.
Now the next point in the shortcomings of delusion is abandoning objections to that in verse 183. When looking at this verse, it says, beginning with an opinion, anyone who desires this body and I are friends. The response is, since all desire their own bodies, why do you not find joy in theirs?
That the inviners, the developers, Lu Rangi Tether Shiba Meja, 강시 다기 류든 되제 이동원교와 대단 다 시임베 텔라 가와이노 시나 심전 탐지 랑구 류데비 젠기 류텔라야 다고 찌마가 랑기 류라 차바다 젠기 류라 메바 미리소스.
Reading through the commentary to this verse, it says, beginning with an argument. Although the body itself does not understand this, I desire this body. I find it attractive and we are both friends. Therefore, I like it. To answer that, it says, as all sentient beings desire their body, why does one not regard the body of others as and its happiness as mine? It is unsuitable to be attached to one's body and deride the body of others.
Shiba lula seba ta lula chakbati nyeba tumin jongkong jongni yinyans tanjo la nyimbu limbi chetu songwar chawanes.
That brings us to the last point in the section explaining the faults of delusion. The fourth point is, though craving after the body is the source of much wrongdoing, one must guard it in order to take the essence of pleasures and endowments. Let's begin with reading through verse 184, and it reads, therefore, in order to benefit migrating beings, I shall give away this body without any attachment. Although this has many faults, I should uphold it like a worker's tool.
So Lord.
Mm.
Yeah, David dagi chame ban rola beji lui tan chatin nyemaya luji cheje songor chas. Tinza ta lula chakba delaya lula chakba di nyeba tomi jongko imbe ani lula chakba doni luti enta longche ro lula chakba doni seba doni lu longche gogres lu ani chona ani shenlaya ani jimba tantu gogres.
To overcome attachment to the body, we see the body as something that is an object of enjoyment. Since it is an object of enjoyment, we can also use it for the sake of others.
Terda da lula chaba dogore sondi lula ya chabi ngondi ra lula ya chabi ngondi ani chaba digi lula ya chaksu dusu dolaya ani samlu nembu tangoya di ta nenga zo chagros ra jadangi chakpa aslawandi begi ani chok chigla honde ya rochik ra pa ani chok chigla jarde ya rochik o dindi la ya dewa jagdo asro kanji ani chagbi lo dige lula chagbi lo dige ani zandan la ya lu gi netsul lagbi lu khorang gi netsul lagbi ani pe sel gibi gi ta yong gi nambe soroji ani teni ani lula ya juguyores lula chagbati.
The section is focusing on ridding ourselves of attachment to the body. So what is that sense of attachment that is attached to the body? What is the nature, the entity of this attachment which is attached to the body? We need to think about it. When we look at the desire that we have towards the body, well, this desire is a biased state of mind. It is a one-sided appreciation of the body, for example, in that it focuses only on one side or only in one direction, and it exaggerates the attributes of the body. It exaggerates the state of the body in finding it completely appealing.
Re chakdan dans laundi pigi chok chigla hongwi netsuji res ra ta di ko di kari tobgi di chawares laundi mombi tobgi yaja yada mombi tobgi kasan neluki yul khorangi neluk chimachijingi mashibi wangi 아니 율들 때온디 더 어머나 배 셀게버지 하바 어머나 셀게버지 마 쳬바 어 딘디지 마도 응어요 내술이야 아니 따마두디 아니 초슬홍도 거레스 간지 초슬홍세 제라야 아니 디 온도 송니 아니 지 자와 가르치느냐 아니 자와도 너로야지 마도 딱다 비기들 내 두고 말았어 새 딱다지 개매봐 인자 그 레기 말았어 라
And that is the case with anger or attachment. Both of them are biased state of mind in that they fall to one direction and they thus become partial. They become partial in that, first of all, they rise due to confusion, due to ignorance, and they do not understand reality as it is, and thereby they either exaggerate some features or they deny other features. This is what happens with anger or attachment in becoming one-sided application. And because of this partiality, we perform actions which become mistaken actions. They become mistaken actions because we are not precise. We do not have the right measure of reality as it is, and we act on that basis.
제 간지 간주다 세다 마소나 약부치라 틱다 마소나 약부치 개부투 바이나 되니 껴고 말아봤으라 어딘서 다 차단게 원도 로스베 jel야 아니 자위기 시기 틱다 마소나 아니 껴대죠 차기도 왔으라 그래서 디치는 지금 말다 간지 녀바 임바디 노르요 바인자 녀바레스 노르면은 렉바레스 어디차기도다 간지 도르드나 산지기 취어디 공무여 내수지려야 지주는 로고여 바디 야시야담바 로
If we take the right measure of a particular thing, it means that we know how to draw the lines in a straight way, right? So we can delineate phenomena, we can draw the line in a precise way if we can take the measure in an appropriate way. Whereas if we draw crooked lines, which means that our appreciation of phenomena, of the qualities and so forth is incorrect, it means that we make mistakes, and this is the meaning of having faults. If we have no mistakes, it means that we are on the positive side. If we make mistakes, we're on the faulty side, on the negative side. And this is what we're dealing here within the Buddha Dhamma, right? How to make sure that we do not land on the mistaken side, the faulty side, but on the unmistaken, the positive side.
어디래셔다 안제베 나노라야 룰라 차바 메리바 테베나스 다기 랑기 룰라 차바 메바 드로라 펜비치르도 루짐바 땅을 차오 십개바 룬 다들 통미기 대단나야 대송차 팀딩 유린 초반이 텔레소나 망부치 제시바터 룰라 때는 션도 망부 드바 대나 룬들라 네바 마야 직된반남 쿠르키 텐데 신단 준비 레기 제신도 신단도 소월 차오스.
Now the commentary says, therefore, as it is unsuitable to have attachment for one's body, without attachment, I shall practice generosity with my body for the purpose of others. As Arideva says in his 400 stanzas, one views the body of course as an enemy, yet one looks after it. From living long according to the rules, many merits will be generated. As one achieves a lot of the purpose of others, it depends on this body. Although it has many faults, it needs to be protected for the purpose of others, like a body in its action of holding a chariot to carry the burden of worldly beings.
룬 다들 통스 다 녀바 탐지기 싸워로디 류임비 소르지 송고도스 류 다들 류로 차단 강가 지중인지 류임비 소르 송고도스 인자 태양아주다 제바 최고야 로 아니 차 단지 공도 갈송고리슬라운디 아니 류 코랑원이 강야 sorguyor 말이 아니 독자체나 shedan 끼기요 말이 야부체나 아니 가와끼기요 말이 아니 샘켜랑은 가진 딱이스 가진 딱이스 되메기 저 가진 지기스 송으로 왔으라.
Here it says that we regard the body as an enemy. We regard the body as an enemy from the viewpoint of being the object of afflictions, such as anger, attachment, and so forth. So this needs to be investigated. We need to think about it. We need to think about it, for example, in relation to the body not giving rise to certain emotions on its own, in a sense that the body does not react with anger or with attachment in relation to pain or pleasure. It is the mind that reacts in this way. So the question is, why, mind, do you react in this way if the body doesn't react in this way?
당하랑 도바이기들 잡았다. 배나 류기 현든 지역이 로 심전 탐지기 아니 된루야기 차긴 조직 류 지겨라서 배나 인지기야 잔주 샘공야 딘딜 소비기 아니 도비 용데 마부지기 땡디 아니 미 류티기 지겨라서 다야 착당라 소비기 미바디야 류레 미니 아니 착당 지겨레스 디지디기 파 약부 심주 제바이나 잔념 소르지 자이나 이념 녀이나 이념 소르지 류아 딘디로지 자금은 됐으라.
So we still need to think about this point. At least Geshe's way of thinking about it is that we also use the body for developing the wish to be of benefit to others. We use the body for benefiting other living beings. To be able to benefit others, we use this body. We develop love and compassion. We develop qualities of realizations on the basis of this body. But similarly, we can say that also in relation to this body, anger, attachment, and so forth arise. And that being the case, you can say that the body is both a friend and a foe.
이나 당간주 레 당부 qablaya 아니 류디게 조 착당기 아니 규체 마토비 아니 다 셴바 치투요 말았디 찍니 랑기 남주기 만다마리 니니 다 레 당부 qablaya 아니 피기 다 류라미기 아니 세바시 슈크체타와 로 딘디기 톤다 용기어라스 다 딘자 갑딜 조디 류다탄 통세디 차바 도비 체드 아니 류단 tar 아니 따투바이나 아니 류라미기 아니 차바 뇽드야기 펜도 여반자 아니 디숭고 여레스 마도 류디 짜치무 마임바 만줄라야 류드 고금에바 덴디지 자원인 송고 여마라스라.
So then for beginners, Geshe reckons that you emphasize the seeing of the body as an enemy. Currently, we have not enough wisdom in a sense that our wisdom is not sharp enough. Wisdom to begin with as beginners is still subject to certain faults. We have excessive states of mind such as attachment and so forth. So to begin with, we need to reduce the power of such afflictive states of mind. So to bring such afflictive states of mind down, we, for example, regard the body as an enemy. So it is not at all the case that we have no use whatsoever to the body as we see it as an enemy. It is not to say that at all. But to begin with, in order to at least reduce the power of our afflictive states of mind, which are cause to begin with, we see the body as an enemy.
딘전 아니 로빈 아얀 데와키 륜 다들 통미기 세디 담로 땅쇼 찍라야 아니 녀바 탐지기 종공도디 땡디 류 치기연자 동하 탐지기 땡디 류디 치기연자 류디 소소라페 아니 다난신도지 딘디기 통주디 용 따 요레스 이나야 아니 다나세 때진 류베티 아니 돌바이나 아니 지금을 류송고리 간스나 류기 톱기 류라테니 춤된 유린 소원의 대비 소나 망보 제스는 란시 니기기 된 망보 쉬우지 아니 드비야기 차긴 쪼지디 아니 미 류디 차고레스.
This is what Aryadeva means in his 400 stanzas. Looking again at the verse that is quoted in the commentary, one views the body, of course, as an enemy, in that it is the basis of so many faults, and yet one looks after it. One looks after it because if we dispense with it, if we cast it aside in thinking that it is an enemy, viewing it as an enemy, it means that we will not have the conducive conditions for acting for our benefit and for the benefit of others, which is to say that the body is needed as a conducive condition, as a requirement for being able to work for the sake of both self and others.
다들 시바 샘 온도 차와세티. 샘 온도 차와로 숨스 게위 파치 로버 차와타. 님불 준비 또 깨바타. 게위 미불 지치도 냠버 차와차오스.
That brings us to the next point in the text, which is point 4 in the section under point B. When practicing the application of exchanging self and others, one should exert control over the mind. Now, point 4 is exerting control over the mind. It consists of 3 points: turning back obstacles to virtue, developing the strength of effort in the antidote, and placing oneself in one-pointed equipoise upon a virtuous focus.
데르다 담보 게위 파치 로버 차와세티. 샘 온도 고레스. 샘 비 차당기 시몬도 땅이 말레스. 샘기 원 심치네. 아니 드로고레스. 단디 드로얄이야다 게위 파치 게와치발이야 파치 칸요바디 아니 도바 체고레 송디 아니 게와다 메기위기 남샤디 인지미니까 신고그라서 아니 자와 가르치나 게워드고요 자와 가르치나 메게워드고요 메긴디기 아니 남샤디 마시 버드 아니 디라야 파르치칭인디 아니 도야 제토고 말았어.
So the section that explains how we overcome obstacles, turning back obstacles to virtue, is part of exerting control over the mind. Because in order to exert control over the mind, we need to overcome such obstacles, obstacles to virtue. In order to do that, we need to be able to distinguish between virtue and non-virtue. We need to be able to know what makes a certain action become a virtuous action and what makes another action become a non-virtuous action. We certainly need to know that, because until we develop the right knowledge of what constitutes virtue and non-virtue, we'll not be able to overcome such obstacles to virtue, and thereby we will not be able to exert control over the mind.
다 딘디 용해라야 자위나 대위 제비 쩨비 촉 다기 키비 지니데 바요 땀네 텐지니 닌다 무버 도버차스.
So then verse 185 says, so enough of this childish behavior. I should follow in the footsteps of the skillful, having recalled the advice concerning conscientiousness. I shall turn away sleep and lethargy.
대회는 되비세보단 납슴단 뇌슴속 신이기 민튼 초라 쇼와 제비 쩨버 초키 다기 란돌라 키비 산게다 장섬 남지 제수 니티 기위 쳬 남라 파유비 땀네 템버치니 니다 무버속 신이기 발전남 시딜리 거든 겨든 뇌수 무바다 니든 될란던다 태점티 저방아본데다 기위 노 kumbi chongon labin kyamban zuchit patar bebe dobar chasha power chaos.
The commentary reads, therefore, being fed up with the actions of the childish, we engage in the obstructing conditions for calm abiding, such as craving for sense objects, covetousness, harmful intent, and the like. I follow the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are proficient in what has to be done and what has to be abandoned. Mindful of the advice to be conscientious of virtuous dharmas, I strive in pacifying and abandoning the obstacles to calm abiding, such as sleep, fogginess, and the like, as explained in a letter to a friend. Now, fogginess here is another translation for lethargy. So Nagarjuna in his letter to a friend says, mental excitement, regret, harmful intent, and fogginess or lethargy, sleep, aspiration for sense objects, and doubt. These 5 obscurations are the thief that robs the wealth of virtue. Hence, know them well.
어디다 시링 나노 송대야기 거든 겨단 너선 무바탄스 다 만지야다 겨바딩 안주 남이 니치기야스라 어디 치고다 아니 겨바체발은 겨바티 갑디 아니 게위 그 토비 촘공 따비기 아니 겨바디 카레스나 겨바체발은 겨바티 샤고라스 라
Nagarjuna in his letter to a friend mentions mental excitation. So all of us are familiar with mental wandering, mental excitation. Another thing that he mentions is regret. And here the particular sense of regret that is considered to be a thief that robs us of the wealth of virtue is regretting virtue. So there are different types of regret. Here the type of regret that Nagarjuna refers to is regretting virtuous actions done before. That sense of regret is robbing us of the wealth of virtue.
Then niba nimbola zumbi topkiwa. Nimbola zumbi topkiwa. Gyasi tuji chenam tar ribi sen suchate. Ninsen meba mambe na dagi dungan tar nam tarchins.
Now, point B comes under the heading of developing the strength of effort in the antidote in verse 186. Let's look at this verse. Just like the compassionate sons of the victor, I shall bear the rigors of what is appropriate. If I do not make a constant effort day and night, when will my suffering ever come to an end?
Terejda disiushureda ro zombi topkina kandas zombi topki gores laundi ani gyasi chanju samba nanshingi pe ani ninsen yewa meba pigila ya ani kaligyan ro kaligyan beba cheni ani machena ani nganzu kewa thomamoni komdebigi dunga gyoda cheba ani pe ani tsang tarchen yaji khagbu shujres ro.
So now Shantideva says we need to make strong effort. We need to put strong effort in day and night without making a distinction between day and night. We should continue to work hard. And we need to do that because we have been taking birth since time without beginning and up until now. And without that hard work, we will not be able to put a stop to suffering and the cause of suffering. We will not be able to bring them to an end.
Gyasi toji chambu namtari nimbu top kibi rigbi sen sombar chadi ninsen chebati takpar mambeb na dagi dungar nam tarchi nyam samla tomodan tomomayimbi shine gombala bebar chawos.
Think like the great compassionate ones, I shall start suitable practices to generate the power of the antidote. If I do not practice continuously day and night, then when shall I leave suffering behind? One should strive in meditating on the common and uncommon kinds of calm abiding.
That giving me bola tiju the nyambar shawanis, David dribble service lobby lamli sem lente yanda migla takpariya dagi nyambar shawachas.
That brings us to the last verse in this chapter. First of all, let's look at the outline. So placing oneself in one pointed equipoise upon a virtuous focus in verse 187. Therefore, in order to dispel the obscurations, I shall withdraw my mind from wrong paths and constantly place it in equipoise upon the correct object of observation. Yeah. Yeah, what is the common and uncommon combining? Dila shine tomon dan tomon maimba seashdoa. Dila tomon dan tomon maimba kandechinas.
대치당 아주 친한 도모와도 제거라스. 지당기 신내디 비기 있다지 배나 지당기 신내 주주디 메디위 쇼라이나야 아니 신내 주주 창장치 신내 토네 배나 something 오실로 소바 어딘지게 주주디 요레스 다이나야 아니 신내 주디 당지 마리발로 소바 콘도 som비 아니 저번가 보고 아니 님분 조통인기 신내지 요라스 디 조 denshi migwa soni dribi shinedeleya sunguyaza di tomo maimbi nambi shoni shebi tomo maimbi shinedi o dindiji sungu yiresra
masani mayan di kunongi chanayan di chanchugi semgi kunelande yandila shine tomo maimbaji
다 dindi lab chogira den tomo maimba chagira chanju sem 간지 토모든 토모 많이 봤어요. 지사디 아니 친한이래 잘고레스.
네, 디 not so something 길이 담보 고 주더라. 토모 많이 발라디 그시 대신이 샤초그레스. 제 kunungi.
Yeah.
So here when we distinguish between common and uncommon, we can distinguish it from the viewpoint of Buddhist and non-Buddhist tradition. So the practice of calm abiding in order to attain absorptions is not found only in the Buddhist tradition, but it is common also with non-Buddhist traditions. So you have those traditions which are called the Tirthikas traditions, which also consist of developing dhyanas or absorptions. But here, the type of calm abiding that we discuss in this context is a Buddhist way of cultivating calm abiding, which is gearing up and eliminating grasping at the self. It is geared up to eliminate our obscurations, the different forms of obscurations, which means that in cultivating calm abiding here, we choose a certain focal object, such as, for example, focal objects from the four truths. So developing calm abiding, focusing on the four truths, for example, is what we use in order to, at the end, eliminate our afflictions. So such calm abidings are unique to the Buddhist tradition from the point of view of what you observe. They are not shared with, or they are not common to non-Buddhist schools of thought.
Yeah, Tevenas dinma losai. 뉴먼버드 시시드번 타다서비 칠도 상동 깨고라 대양문도 신의 그룹이 신의 기비 객로비 람 데비 남도소 타다레 셈 렌데 봄비 두지 기기고네 양답이 미발라 딱버 다기 셈냠버 차오스 dorna shinin tomo wa drupsur geba nyentu yisale sombatan tomo mayi bi drupsur jonde da lebe kama la shile gomrum ne sombatar shiba chene shini gombi penyo da magumbi nyemik samni sem nebi tab gula sobi tenginzi gombal bebar chashin geba parudu chimbi lamji rimba chejong le sombatar shibar chawo nilu ngondu kiwi langdongi drimni sabian zani jambaya tis jil on the
Let's look at a commentary to this section. It says, therefore, in order to eliminate all afflictive obscurations and obscurations to knowledge or cognitive obscurations, one needs to generate superior insight. Before that, one needs in turn to achieve calm abiding, and therefore turn a mind away from all wrong paths, such as disturbing thoughts of sense objects, which obstruct the generation of calm abiding. By way of the 8 abandoning recognitions, I shall place the mind continuously in equipoise on a correct object. In short, how to attain the common calm abiding is explained extensively in the hearer's grounds, and the way of attaining the uncommon calm abiding is explained in this text and in Master Kamala Shila's stages of meditation. Understanding the method from this text and by contemplating the benefits of meditating on calm abiding and the disadvantages of not meditating on calm abiding, one should strive in meditating on calm abiding by way of the 8 stages of calm abiding and so forth. I think it should be the 9 stages. It should be read by the 9 stages of calm abiding and so forth.
대다디 발급기 측수제바 세트 차고다 넬룽원도 교회 항동기 중이 사변선 점바야 요메딘선 넬라랄리피 토머신네 둘랑 개버자 뒤비 측수제보스 이번 레벤선 전주스 저벌 주벌레 삼된 템바시 개버 전수 저벌 남신 가신 중고 시셔벌 삼된 템바시 레우디 개버 제오스.
Now, the summarizing verse says the destruction of the 2 obscurations from the root with superior insight to which reality is obvious depends in turn on immovable concentration. Hence, one should first become proficient in attaining calm abiding. Dila 똑같이 일라나?
Okay.
Kadila dona shine tumong jupsu gevanyentugi sale sombatan tumaimbe jupsu di shungdi tan lobon kamal shiles di halam kabdila chinangi mare tuma maimba keva di chinan peshe shagi marwa peshe di kunung tone shagi menro keran samna kansan nyentugi sala Geshe gyagi shine di halam number chugi
년사 거려야 토모위 신이 간지 아니 페나 가서다 디세르 남지 지디 샤라 남바징 람드츠 그런바티 지디 샤라 남바징 람세조라
데니엔투기 살
송거라 디송거라 아니 비기 치르비 쌈된 드즈디 간다지 톤 두고레스 라운디 아니 데발라 아니 교연당 공말라 용된 때니 아니 공미기 아니 something 샘도 두고로스 베지 또 도수 거를 상고다 년토 살이 송아디
네 실은 남아쟁이 곰바디 치르기 곰탄치 인사 년토기 살아디 제시가고 카리나
가서 디 아니 년토기 년토 로보 망부치기 아니 셰라 남진기 람곰니 신이 동이베 망부 용거다 뎀비 이게 아니 뎀비 남진기 실라 아니 드마퉁에 벤는 년도 파발에 something which top 댕긴다 두 삼월로 아니 칼 댕길서 셰라 남진기 아니 람 뎀비 신이 두그레스
Here it says in the summary in short, how to attain calm abiding is explained extensively in the here's ground, and the way of attaining the uncommon calm abiding is explained in this context and in Master Kamala Shila's states of meditation. So I asked Geshe about the distinction between common and uncommon. If the common calm abiding is explained extensively in the here's ground, which is a Buddhist text, I told Geshe that it seems that here the explanation would be, or the distinction between common and uncommon would be in terms of the motivation for developing calm abiding rather than whether you use Buddhist or non-Buddhist methods or techniques in order to attain them. Well, Geshe says that it seems that in this text, the Shravaka Bhumis, the hearer's grounds, the explanation of attaining calm abiding is consists of explaining the meditation of considering the lower levels as coarse and the higher level of peaceful in order to attain worldly forms of absorption, which is the system that non-Buddhist practitioners use. So then the question is, why is then this system, this non-Buddhist system, outside the system explaining the Buddhist text? So Geshe says that since this text is called the hearer's ground, it is focusing on those practitioners, Shravaka practitioners, who might not have a good understanding of the way to attain common abiding in a way that is more of oriented towards the Buddhist technique. So it could be that many of them are still using such forms of meditations as meditating on the coarse aspects of the lower levels and the peaceful aspect of the higher levels as a method for attaining a state of absorption. So rather than choosing objects such as the four truths for cultivating common abiding, they're still might be focusing on the coarse and peaceful aspects. And therefore, for these types of practitioners, could be that this text is teaching this form of meditation. So it is here called, let's look at the commentary again. Attaining the common common abiding, as explained extensively in the Shravaka Bhumi, the hearer's ground. And the uncommon one is explained in this text and in Master Kamala Shila's stages of meditation. All right, so I didn't read, I think, the last section of this commentary. So the name of the chapter, this is the commentary on the 8th chapter called Explaining Mental Stabilization or Absorption, from the commentary on the introduction to the actions of Bodhisattvas, called The Entrance to the Children of the Conquerors, or Bodhisattva's Way of Life. So we have finished the 8th chapter, the chapter on absorption. Okay. So as we finish with the 8th chapter, the next chapter that we will cover will be the 10th chapter. We will skip over the 9th chapter for the time being. We will study the 9th chapter later on in our study program after we'll cover tenets and other topics, to make sure that we'll be able to make more sense of chapter number 9. So we will move on to chapter number 10, the dedication chapter.
Yeah. Okay, now too old. Federation da ship level chubang ho tembas. Ngo will level tembati. Ta namjung anzu lama komo zu song de. Ani tongda ni la chawa ni sek. Tongma kolong ke chawa ta. Ani tamadi ani hoa ke chawa song yoros. Dinza tanganzu chanzang da droyo marda ina ya. Kumang chajin droyanza. 아니 되니 땅고위 레벨 직 쉬잖아 야부여서리 삼진다 응한 쉬어 체레스라
So we are going to study the 10th chapter from Devil's Guide to Bodhisattva of Life, the dedication chapter. As it is said in the text on mind training, there are two important activities, one at the beginning and one at the end. So the activity that is important at the beginning is correcting one's motivation, and at the end it's important to dedicate whatever virtue or merit you have thus accrued in taking up this activity. So it is also really important to do it in relation to a study of Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life. And although we're not going to complete the text here at this point in time, as we're leaving out for the time being chapter number 9, still the effort that we put into studying this manual, beginning with last year and carrying on with this year, is tremendous. And therefore, it is also important to make sure that we accumulate all the merit and the virtue that we've accrued in doing so.
Teresa then did the ngoas laundi, pig kanji ngoju zech shilla shani, and malam gabati, kanji zech shilla shani, and malam gabatilia, ngoas sigores, that dinji ze kaya meva, chetangi, malam gavana, di malam remoto, ngo maris, or dindi, the ngo the malam gava, dindi songodas,
So here we're making dedications. Now, to dedicate for a particular purpose, you need a certain substance. So you're using something, a certain substance, and you dedicate it for the sake of a certain goal. If you have no substance that is used for a particular purpose, you can make aspirational prayers. That's the common explanation of the distinction between dedication and aspiration, right? So with dedication, you dedicate with a particular substance. With aspiration, you're aspiring for a particular thing, but without a particular substance.
There's a come dear and level chubang who will level kavlaya, then would you say the Lanamachi Chasaros, the raw condu and the Jinso passion to Zube and the Chanjusen big Joba Yung Zobalaya and Lava Inza and the Labi that gives our D and the Tianchi Ranchibu Mayimba Ranjan Sumjan Tamji and the Lava, Tian Piggy and the Tadachibu Mahimba, Deba, Maumba, Love Tada Lavshimba, Samalo, and come dig, and then go with Zela Shani, that watch you go.
So here, when we go over the dedication chapter, we think of the substance that we use for the sake of our dedication, which is the things, the material that we've covered up until now, the generation of the mind of enlightenment and the practice of the 6 perfections, done not only for our own sake, but also for the sake of others. Not only for the sake of the presence, but in considering the benefit of self and others in the 3 times, in the past, at the present, and in the future.
Yala Gugani Shabala, Levi Shon Shabbat, Levinson Tambul, Levi Shon Shabala Sum. Draw con Chanjus and be Chabal and Juba. Movie, Dortampatam, Moa gave a Sheba, Garden Jesu can be Chatsavo. Tambul draw con Chanjus and be Chabal and Juba, on Dortampani, Dagi Chanju Chabala, Juba number, somebody gave a county, draw con Chanju and Juba shows.
Right, let's look at, first of all, the outline for chapter 10. We're going to begin with a brief presentation to the dedication for all migrators to engage in the Bodhisattva conduct. Then we're going to look at the extensive explanation of the dedication. And finally, at the end of this chapter, we will pay homage by recalling the kindness. First thing first, let's begin with a brief presentation of the dedication for all migrators to engage in the Bodhisattva's conduct.
There's a ditsig Lela Ujadan Lela Urendata, Dagi Chanju Chabalan Jubar number Zamba is Laundi and Sozurani. The Kanji Sozurangi and Chik Chanju Simbi Chabalaya, Sawa Nini, any Chik Penatan Jungdu Kolonsam Kimebaina, the Sig the Tambaina, the Kazoda, the Jung Sorach Charo Chigdos, Tinza 아니 단답은 죽투 매바이나야 몽발이야 지금 죽투나 삼비 꿀롱지 여바나 아니 찌디 겨르치니 아니 죽벌 기위기 잔주심비 쩌발이야 죽벌 기위기 아니 개와칸 여바티 아니 쪼실샤니 뭐 된샤바나 야사라다 죽 여바나다 초도 겨바라스라.
Beginning with the first verse from chapter 10, it says, by whatever virtue there is due to my having composed engaging in the deeds of a bodhisattva. So when we use this verse for our own dedication, since we haven't composed Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, when you say that, it might imply that you're actually proclaiming a lie, a fallacy, in thinking that I have composed it and therefore I'm dedicating now my virtue for the sake of others. So if you haven't engaged in virtue so far, if you haven't, for example, composed the text so far, you can still think of the activities that you will engage with in the future. Also, you will now dedicate all the virtue of future actions versus actions that you will take.
어디리다 단 디나노라야 디치긴 거라스다 베시치다 오니 용 도카오 뭐 제급이 균생 가르세지 뭐와 뭐 제주 뭐 제급이 균생 아니 뭐 제주세디 요나디스 뭐 제급이 균생 가르스라운디 랑기 게자 칸 사샤바티 칼레간 뒤츠탄 게자 사샤바티 잔줄이야 뭐고야디 베마즈바 케침보 레송라다 라 케지 뭐 마토바이나 아니 간주 샘니 간주 샘레 베 아니 겨초조 쇼치 피기 아니 차당 몽솜기 샤마도 겨초조 쇼 차자 아니 개와 디 추소스 줘야 베 년가 베 첨부 여반자 아니 간 제바디 갑도 다가랑이야 잔줄로 뭐 샤바나 게자디 상 마게 바도 짜원이니다 게자디 촉 마리스 어 딘디송고도 아스라.
Now, before we continue with that, you might wonder, for what reason do we dedicate the virtue that we have thus accrued? Well, we have worked hard in order to create those roots of virtue, and it is important to dedicate them for the sake of enlightenment, because without dedicating them in this way for the sake of enlightenment, we recognize that our mind is subject to change because it is under the control of anger, attachment, and ignorance. And when a mind comes under the influence of anger, attachment, and ignorance, it is very dangerous because it is putting to waste the virtue that we have created with so much hard work. But if we dedicate the virtue that we have created, we are safeguarding it so that it will not be destroyed by anger, attachment, and so forth. So we are safeguarding it all the way until achieving the state of enlightenment.
당화 약슈디 호라나 메바디 아니 잔주도 모야디 심전 탐지기 체도 도잘하는 뭐 양다고 좀 산지 공부토비 체도 모야디 호라나 메바디 차고르스 뭐 고나 메바디 간선 토비자 탈두바디 토비자 고나 메바디 심징이 체도 잔주 공부토에 들어왔어. 이제 대랑 모야 딜 하가지 아니 뭐와 초도 교와지 메바레스 딘자다 안주기 직소주기 샴바지 제 고야 매교 제 마토나 드요 안 다가랑기 송 다가랑 껴지네 뭐야바나 다 딜하지 요 말했어 식tun도 된다 참은 산딩이 다기 잔주 쪄버는 주번 넘었어 여가는 잔주 쪄는 주버 쇼세티.
Dedicating our virtue for the sake of unsurpassed enlightenment is regarded as the highest dedication that can be made, since the highest object of attainment that can be attained is enlightenment. The highest dedication would be for that state. So if you cannot do anything else, at the very least, we can use this first verse from chapter number 10 in order to dedicate our virtue. So it says, by whatever virtue there is due to my having composed engaging in the deeds of the Bodhisattva, may all migrating beings engage in the deeds of the Bodhisattvas. Shall we leave it here for now? Gewadi Nyududa Lama Sange Drugyune Doa Chikyamalupa De Salago Parasho Chanchu Semcho Rinpoche Magye Banang Ke Gyurji Gewa Nyamba Mebaya Gone Gondu Bewarasho Kanri Rawe Kawe Shinkan Pendan Dewa Malu Jungwe Ne Chenre Sewan Tenzin Gyantsoye Shabe Site Bardu Tengyuru
Tengyuruji
Tu su chan shin chang gun
Chenjang
ya
Yawe
we ten zin
Tenzin
kyong pe we
Kyompe
kung zu zu
Kunzu
po sen cho sun
Chosun
ko we
Kowe
le mon
Lemon
tu du pa ga so
Panga
du je
Dojima
gon du sha ten
Shabden
cho